Elana Auerbach is a sensuality guide and educator and the creator of the Sure Thing Love Experiment, a project invited couples to replace sex struggles with a simple weekly pleasure practice as a way to reconnect with desire, intimacy, and joy. Drawing on more than 20 years of personal exploration in sensuality and a long history of supporting others through facilitation and coaching, she offers shame-free, practical, pleasure-centered tools that help individuals and couples dismantle sexual performance pressure, move through resistance, and cultivate resilient, playful connection. Something we could all do lots more of, I'm sure. So thank you so much for joining me from California today. It's very, very kind of you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to just move this over so everyone can see the book
There it
in the
is.
screen here, you know? We got to make sure.
Absolutely.
Whoa,
Oh,
there it
he's
goes.
diving
It's
towards
all
us.
right. Change of scenery, no
Mm.
problems. We can be fluid. Okay, there we
It
go.
must have been, it must have been very exciting the day it came off the printing press and you got a box full of them
Oh,
at home. It must have been pretty emotional, I can imagine.
it was, I'll tell you, Andrew, it was a surprise. A friend of mine leads a outside dance once a month at a nearby park in Oakland. I went that morning. It was a Saturday morning. And at the end, she had us all circle around, put our hands in, and send out all the good energy that we just cultivated out into the world, into nature. And she just had one hand in. So I was kind of curious, and she said, there's a reason I only have one hand in. And then after we sent out the good energy, she says, in my other hand, and then she goes, is Ilana's book. And
How
I
fabulous is
hadn't
that?
ordered one yet. And she had ordered, this was just a few days after the paperback was
Yeah,
available.
yeah.
So it was one of my best friends who, had the book, and it was a moment. It was very emotional. It was a surprise and a delight. And we took photos with the book and with us.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
so, yeah, it's really something else. It feels, it's like, it's the book baby out
It
in the
is.
world, and it was
Mm.
wow. So I
It
felt a
exists.
little kind of that the rest of that day I was a little jittery, a little like, whoa, it's like something's different. So readjusting my internal system to having this, very exposing. I'm very, and that's just the type of person I am. I'm very open and I am willing to share intimately. And I have done so in the book. So having that out in the public domain and people reading, it's been a thrill. It's been really wonderful.
Mm. And do you think that openness is something that's lived through your whole life? So just to go back a little bit. So when you were sort of 15, 16, 17, do you think that person you were then would recognize who you are today?
That's such an interesting question. I think there's a part of my 15, 16, 17-year-old who certainly would recognize. And there's the bigger part who was at the forefront of my consciousness and in my interactions, who I call disconnected D, who was really a disassociated, going through, I call it the conveyor belt of life.
Mm.
And so not super connected at all, really into what it was that I wanted, what I felt. And so, based on things that happened when I was younger life, with an older brother who was very demanding of attention from my mom, particularly. So instead of feeling all the feelings in a dysfunctional, codependent family, not uncommon, right? I'd go to the golden place, I would call it. I didn't realize this until I was an adult. However, what I realized was I spent a lot of time disassociating and just going through the motions and doing what my parents wanted me to do. I was a very good student. I was very conscientious. That's what all my teachers would say on my report card. She's very conscientious. I would do all my work. I would just do what the authority figure nearby where I would get approval from them. And so as a teen, I can remember like one of my first boyfriend who I was really into, and he was a year older than me, and we explored. We didn't have penetrative sex, but we definitely explored. That's where I had my first orgasm with him, and because of him, because we spent summer where we had agreed to be able to see other people. And when I got back, I was away. I used to go to camp every summer. And when I got back, he had certainly gotten some training. And I didn't know. I didn't get the training. The sex ed that I got had nothing to do, did not mention clitoris, did not, and hadn't explored because I was a good girl. I was really disassociated. So all of a sudden, we're in the back seat of his car, and I'm like, whoa, what just happened? So that part that I call my wild sensual self, and I give her a name, Vivacious Viv. Yes, who really woke up in the back seat of that car that day, uh, that part will recognize. And it's so grateful that I've created this weekly practice because it's given her a place to have freedom to come out full force into the light.
So from the person you were in that backseat, somebody that hadn't explored their own body, hadn't explored your own sort of self-pleasure practice, to where
Mm.
you are today, there's a lot of steps in that journey, I guess. So what was it, do you think, made you realize this was your calling? Is that a good word for it? What was it that made you think that this was your purpose, really?
Well, I feel like my purpose is being a priestess of love and connection. And I woke up to that realization about over 20 years ago.
Okay.
And in when I was ordained as a priestess and leading ceremonies and leading year-long immersions into the sacred feminine mysteries and circles of women that I called the sensual, where women were connecting in with their passion and falling in love with themselves. And so I feel like that's when I recognized that that's what makes me feel alive and good in my body, when I'm feeling love, when I'm sharing love, when I'm reflecting love, when I'm encouraging people to love themselves, even the parts that are difficult to look at, right? And so this practice came out of a over decade struggle with my spouse and I, who I absolutely adore. We are best friends. We navigate life really well together. And like most long term couples, w- I, I just expected that the lust and the passion that was there for the first few years would just carry on, even though it hadn't in past long term relationships. But this was the one. So this
Mm.
should, but of course it didn't, especially after we had a kid and there were more responsibilities, and our focus just was not on cultivating intimacy. And I was never told, just like I never explored my own body and my own pleasure, which of course I I have taught my kids uh to do. To you got to know, we've got to know how we want to be touched, what feels good to us, before we allow and invite another person into our sacred holy of holy space, of our body, to touch us, because then we can guide them, then we can really have an empowering and fulfilling experience in the sensual sexual realms, right, as a young person, as at any age, really. So um, I didn't realize that I needed to practice intimacy with my spouse if I wanted to continue to deepen an intimacy. Now, in hindsight, it seems kind of silly, because if you want to practice and get better at anything, right, you have to practice. I have a meditation practice that I do most every morning. And I know that if I don't get my butt on that cushion and sit for 20 or 30 minutes, then my internal experience of the day is going to be different. I'll be more reactive. I'll feel more frustration, and it just won't be as pleasurable. So, more often than not, even though when I don't feel like it, I'll go and sit on the cushion. And even if I'm spacing out the entire time, I never leave the cushion and think, oh, that was a waste of time. And so, what I realized after 12 years of struggle with my spouse, like all couples, and I've been told by many sex therapists and couples counselors and sex coaches and such, 100% of couples have difference in desire. Of course, we're different. So,
Yeah.
how do you bridge that? That's true with my spouse and I. And then not only is there difference in desire, there's, did he get the message? Is he gonna, I'm kind of sending the signal that I'm, interested. Is he gonna get it? Is something gonna happen? Is he gonna reject me? Am I gonna reject him? All of this, and of course that happened over the course of 12 years because we didn't have this explicit agreement. Not until December 2020, I had come up with this idea, and it was almost 2 years before then, Andrew, with a friend who wanted to have a lover, a consort on Saturdays. And I said, well, I want that too. And there was so much built up gunk between my spouse and I because of the rejection and feeling abandoned and feeling like, well, he doesn't really deserve it. And of course, I'm the one who's missing out. So finally, it's December 2020. I committed to a friend that I was going to invite him into this practice before the winter solstice, the longest night of the year in the northern hemisphere. And
Mhm.
so it's days are getting shorter and I'm nervous and what's going to happen. Turns out our son has a drum lesson on Saturday. So this is my opportunity. This is it. My kid is away. And so I invited him in. I had this planned. I invited him in. I kind of seduced him. We had a lovemaking session. And afterwards, I said, hey, babes, how would you like to deepen an intimacy, pleasure, and connection every Saturday together? And he was like, sugar, that sounds fabulous. And so I had no idea, Andrew, that it would be so life altering. Just this rhythm. We committed to having a weekly practice. And so then when the next Saturday happened, and for many months afterwards, our kid had this drum lesson. So that was our time. That was our time. And so we would just turn towards each other. And it wasn't about having orgasms or having sex, although it did happen. It happens often. That's what our sure thing is. Our intention and what we're looking to fulfill and manifest is a deepening in intimacy, connection, and pleasure with each other. And so that's, and after a few weeks, it was like all of this psychic baggage that I had been carrying and this emotional holding that I didn't even know, and this frustration. Oh, did I have a tone, Andrew? I had this tone. It wasn't nice. So it all disappeared because, and I had no idea that I was carrying all of this because I now had this regular practice that wasn't about, are we going to or are we not going to? We are just going to, it's time. Our kid's at his drum lesson and we turn towards each other. And often how we'll start our sure thing will be, well, one of us will ask the other, what would be most pleasurable right now? And so began this practice that altered my life and continues to be a miracle. And so, about 6 months into our weekly practice, after one of our sure thing sessions, it dawned on me that I needed to share it with the world. And so, ta da! I created the book, which came out February 3rd of this year.
So I think a lot of people listening will resonate with the fact that if you're in a long-term relationship, that life gets in the way. Like it can be kids, it can be menopause, it can be erectile dysfunction, it can be tiredness, can be work, can be stress, can be money, can be whatever. There's a million things that get in the way of what seem to be just intimacy and pleasure when we first got together 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever. And I think one of the big things we don't do as couples, as lovers, as partners is talk is talk about it. And
Mm.
I wonder how did you determine that this was the answer, that creating this practice before the book, sort of creating this practice between you and your husband, that this was the answer to what ailed you.
Mm. I really, honestly, I didn't know. We were trying everything. We
Mhm.
tried everything, and like I said, I had this idea in February of 2018, and it took me, almost 2 years to have the courage and also to let go of the past and give this a go. I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know what was going to happen. I What I did know is that practices, we both have practices. My spouse also has a meditation practice. And so I knew that we have practices that benefit us. And so I thought this this could be something, but I had no idea. I really didn't know. It was just let's try it. Let's see what happens. And what I found, in sharing this, because it's been over 5 years now that we've been practicing, that I've been sharing with clients and friends and family and everybody, and now the book, is that we all have practices. Whether you could have a running practice, you could have a
Mhm.
yoga practice, you could go to the dojo if you have martial arts practice, therapy is a practice. Any practice, taking your dog for a walk, going for a hike, anything that you do regularly in your life, that is a benefit. And that you don't always want to do it. It may take some effort. However, you do it because it benefits you in some way. It lifts your mood, it enhances your life, it keeps you healthy. Whatever it does something. So, and what nobody tells us until now is that we can have practices that cultivate intimacy and pleasure with ourselves and with our most beloveds. So, and this is one of them. And so whenever we want to get better at something, this is one way to really bridge that divide. That inevitably, there's been studies done of the neuroscience and the dopamine and all of the different things that get emitted in our brains, that during the first, those lustful, passionate times at the beginning of a relationship, those will last a maximum of a few years.
Mm.
Maximum. That's it. We aren't Our brains are not built, no matter how hot, the hottest. It just we're not, developed to continue at that level of, firing off all of those whatever you call dopamine and serotonin, and I can't think of the word right now, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So and many of us thrive and desire a long-term relationship and appreciate that, and we struggle with the intimacy part, with the sex part. And so this, I have found, and others have also discovered, that this is one way to just have a rhythm that's not about pressure, and that's about, because the first thing I encourage in the book and with any clients I'm working with is to identify an intention. What is your intention in your sensual sexual life? What's something that inspires and turns you on? And then what's something that inspires and turns your partner on? You may have the same intention, you may have different intentions. Either way works fabulously well. And so your weekly practice is about fulfilling that intention.
Do you think part of the challenge in society is that we've somehow come to define sex as in a heteronormative couple, penetration, penis in vagina, that's sex, and we don't view it as said as, and there's a word you've used a few times now, as pleasure. And if you think about it as pleasure, that could be touching, stroking, looking, licking, tasting, whatever. It might not involve penis or vagina at all, really, but it still can be an incredibly pleasurable time together. But I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform, and we're very orgasm or goal centric. And do you think that's part of the issue, that we've somehow confused what sex actually is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that goes back to, my own personal experience growing up, not being, most of us do not live in a sex positive household, don't grow up in a sex positive family, don't our culture is certainly not sex positive. In fact, it's the opposite. I have a whole section in the book where I unpack, I call it the patriarchal puritanical society that we live in. And so we're actually shamed about our bodies, we're shamed about sex. And so just recognizing that this is the air that we breathe, living in
Mm.
this society that we live in. And so it's about really reclaiming our birthright. I mean, we are given these bodies which have senses, which are sensate, which consider my body a temple of love, because even if I just touch my face right there, oh, that feels so nice. Like just anything, if we awaken, like you said, to what do I find to be pleasurable right now? And change the frame from the goal of getting off to this moment. How much pleasure can I experience right here, right now? Just in the breath. And then when you bring in your beloved and you're just in that inquiry, how much pleasure can let's explore. And I like to call it a love laboratory, because and a pleasure laboratory, because we're experimenting. Just, get on your scientist, coat, or take it off, whatever turns you on, and, and experiment, explore, take a risk, try something different, see having a feather. Maybe a feather feels really good right here, but it doesn't feel really good under my arm. Just explore different ways of being and experiencing different senses in our bodies. And so I think you're exactly right that it's about sex, and it's about penetrative sex in heterosexual couples, or any couples where it's
Mhm.
about the goal to orgasm. And so that's another thing that I think our definition of not only pleasure and sex, or sex, but orgasm is also very limited. We generally define orgasm as those quick contractions of the genitals and some ejaculate, sometimes not, depending on, your depending on the situation. And so that's the orgasm. Well, I disagree. I think that's way too limited. I think that for me, I consider I'm in orgasm if I can surrender to the pleasurable sensations moving through my body that include my genitals, but it's not exclusively my genitals. So it's opening up to the waves, and I can feel it right now, Andrew. I don't know if you can feel it, but feeling, just breathing in and opening to sensation and waves of sensation that are always moving through our bodies. And the thing about, because of our skin, we is I don't know the nerve endings, but the skin obviously covers our entire body, and we can feel, and we can smell, and we can hear, and we can see. And so if we simply surrender, there's no way the most awake person and enlightened person cannot be aware of all of the sensations that are
Mm.
coming in any one moment. It's just impossible. It overwhelms. So have a game. How many times a day, how many times an hour am I willing to be overwhelmed with the sensations that are coming into my body through my senses, through my skin, and begin to shift our perceptual field to finding pleasure in the body and finding pleasure in, and as we practice that, then when our hearts are shattered from grief, from horror, I mean, as mine is every day, of the what's happening in my local community, along with, on the world stage, that
Yeah.
we can be sustained, because while I'm in grief, I also then have the capacity to, oh, can I take a breath right here, and can I feel the pleasure in the breath and in the sorrow and the devastation that I'm feeling as well. So I really believe that as we build our capacity to feel pleasure in our bodies, we will be more present in our bodies. We will be happier and more content, and bring that into our relationships, into our families, and of course then into the world.
So on a very practical basis, so my son has football or soccer, you might call it, every Saturday morning. She's out of the house sort of 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday morning. My daughter's at university, and my wife and I are here.
That's your time.
So this sounds a crazy question. It's very selfish, but what do we actually do? So he's gone. Okay, right. We got 4 hours, and we look at each other and think, okay, this is our sure thing time. What do we actually do? How do
Yeah.
we start?
Okay. Well, the book is an interactive playbook, just so you know. So it has
Okay.
so many ideas, inspirations, questions, guided visualizations, prompts, beyond. And so that will be your support. I wrote
Mhm.
this so that people could have it's a roadmap to ongoing, reliable, sensual and sexual fulfillment. So that's what that is. The first thing you would do is you would, of course, get consent from your wife that she wants to have a weekly practice exploring sensuality together. And then the next thing is you set your intention. And if you're inspired by our intention, you should take that intention, deepening in intimacy, pleasure, and connection with each other.
Mhm.
You could want to explore, orgasm in a different way. You could want to have extend, how your intention is only limited by your imagination, right? So you can set whatever intention inspires you, turns you on. And when you hear your intention, you think, yeah, I want that. So that's what you want. So that's where you're headed. That's your target. Okay? So starting with that. And then once you've set your intention, and then you've got your time. Saturday mornings you've got privacy with you and your wife, and so you can begin. One of the things I there's a whole section in the book about preparing yourself for your sure thing. So finding the things that really soften you and have you feel and return in the body. So it could be taking a walk, it could be practicing yoga, it could be meditating. Me, I love the bath. I love hot water. So you get me in a bathtub. It could be listening to music, dancing to music, anointing yourself with oils, putting oils or lotion, or having a delicious bite of food, whatever it is for you. And you may have many of those things that helps to get you into your body and soften in your heart and in your body. And you could do that together with your spouse, or you could do that individually. That could be part of your sure thing. See,
Hmm.
this is the whole practice is completely personalizable. So you do what feels good to you. And then once you're in this soft place, a sure thing could be you may want to take a bath together. You may want to have brunch where you feed each other delicious food. Or maybe you may bring your breakfast into the bedroom and you eat off of each other's bodies. There's all kinds of things you can do. So once you've got you're feeling you're ready. Often our sure thing starts with our sure thing playlist, because for me, when I'm dancing to some really funky grooves, that really kind of starts the Shakti flowing for me. So sometimes I'm dancing by myself, sometimes I'm dancing with my spouse. And then I may have like, hey baby, I'd really like you to kiss my neck. And so then I'll ask for something. Or like I said before, one of us will ask the other one, what would be most pleasurable right now? And sometimes that'll be like, honey, I'm really tired. I just want to lay in the bed and hold hands. So just lying in the bed, holding hands. Or let's just meditate, but and eye gaze with each other. And so just sitting with each other. Or let's just David Schnarch, who wrote this wonderful book called The Passionate Marriage 30 years ago. He has this thing called hugging till relaxed, which is where each person, his all of his work is about individuating. So saying that each person in the couple is a circle, and that instead of overlapping and the codependent, enabling of a couple, being two circles that you're touching on the outside, but you're in your own sovereignty and self authority and individuation. So he talks a lot about that. So this hugging till relaxed is where each person is standing solidly on their own. I like to feel the roots going down into the earth and rising up into the sky. And then you hug and you hug and you breathe together and you hug until you're both really relaxed and you're feeling each other, but you're really standing in your own individuation and your own sovereignty. And so that could be a way that you start your sure thing practice. And as we practice our sure thing, maybe I'll turn to my spouse and say, well, what would feel most pleasurable for you right now? And then he'll maybe make a request, or he's like, well, I don't really know. And that's a great place to begin, is to say, I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Then just breathe with that, and just breathe and see if something arises. And what I found is that if you continue to ask yourself, and there's a whole part in the book called building our I know what I want muscle, because you can't ask for what you want if you don't know what you want. And when I started really building this muscle for myself over 20 years ago, I would often get, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And I would just keep asking myself. And as you keep asking over the days, over the weeks, you will be astonished to realize that all of a sudden you'll get an answer. Something will bubble up. Oh, let's try that. Whether it's what I want to wear today, or, in the sensual realm of when you're having your sure thing with your partner. Is that a little clearer about what could happen in your sure
Uh,
thing?
Absolutely. Um,
Great.
and do you I should just get the book. Do you sort of have a conversation?
You
Obviously,
definitely should get a book, Andrew.
you might say the sure thing's going to start on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. That's when it's starting. But you must almost have to have like a pre conversation beforehand to sort of discuss what it is and sort of explore something before you start. So is there like a sort of pre discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. So when you're in a really open-hearted, grounded place,
Mm.
that's when I encourage people to invite their spouse into a sure thing practice. Say, I heard about this thing, I got this book, I want to deepen with you. I want to deepen in, and become more intimate with you. I want to share more pleasure together.
Mm.
And so I'd like to explore this. I'd like to try this. How does that sound? And sometimes the other person is like, that sounds fantastic, just like what happened with my spouse. Other times, they may not be ready yet. And that's okay. This is not about coercion at
Yeah.
all. So if your spouse isn't ready, then okay, well, let's talk about that. What is it? Is it something, because there could be, we don't know what's going on with them until you ask, right? And so, like in my relationship, there could be a lot of built up resentment. There could be fear. There could be fear of rejection, fear of being abandoned, whatever happened in the past, especially if you've been in relationship for many years. So
Mm.
be open to asking, what sounds good about this? What doesn't sound good about this? And in the meantime, begin a solo practice, because you can absolutely get a tremendous benefit from having a solo shore practice. And that's just having your own. And so instead of asking your spouse, when I practice by myself, I ask, what would be most pleasurable right now? And then I lovingly, give that to myself and take myself, and of course that can be the full gamut of sensual, sexual, to scent, to listening, having like an orgasmic experience listening to music, if that's your thing. It really is defined by your desires and what you find fun and pleasurable.
I think one of the things, and you mentioned it already, is that I think a lot of us grow up in households where even if it's not necessarily what might be defined as a repressed household, it's certainly in my childhood, my teenage years, I don't remember my parents ever talking about sex. Just never. Can't remember them ever talking about it. Some of them would come on television, maybe a little bit saucy, and oh god, everybody would look away, embarrassed and blush and leave the room, whatever. Never talked about it. So that leads you as the sort of 7, 8, 10, 11, 13-year-old to think there's something sort of shameful or embarrassing, or gosh, something you shouldn't really talk about or do anything with. And how do you help couples when they come to you almost get past that shame element? Because
Mm.
I understand that carving out a particular period of time in a safe space, all those things, but there's something during the dynamic of a relationship, you might have been together 20 years, 25 years, whatever, or 2 years. It doesn't really matter. But you might think, oh, I've always wanted to try role play. I've always wanted to try being submissive. I always wanted to try. And you think, oh God, how am I going to say that? My partner's going to think I'm a freak, or they're going to laugh at me? Or how do you almost help people when they come to you realize that sexuality, intimacy should be shame free?
Mm.
Very long. I'm not even sure it's a very well worded question, but does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. And I call shame is the elephant in the bedroom.
Yeah.
It just
Yes.
is.
It's
And
sitting on the
so
bed. Yes.
it's there. It's
It
between
is.
us. It's suffocating us.
Mm.
So the first thing to do is to name the shame. And I love Brene Brown says that shame cannot exist in the light, or shame requires darkness, something like that. It has to be in the
Yeah,
secret.
yeah.
I don't know exactly the quote. So when we bring shame into the center, excuse me, and we shine a light on it, and we are like, ta-da, there, look, I feel shame. I feel ashamed. I was I was shamed as a child, as a teen, as I was embarrassed when I was
Mm.
watching these sex scenes with the family growing up. Everyone around me was uncomfortable. Nobody talked about sex. No, nobody even mentioned it. I mean, same with my parents. Never a mention. Oh, until That's another story. Uh, so so that's what there's a whole chapter in the book called Shame on Who, which really unpacks this how shame is used to keep us repressed and to
Mhm.
keep us shut down and in a box. And so, how do we do that? We have to shine a light on it. We have to uh, go back. There's a guided journey that takes us back to a moment. It could have been last week, it could have been 50 years ago, of really healing and recognizing that this is something that was put on us. This is not something that comes innately from inside of us. And so
Yeah.
once we discern that this is a societal voice, this is a parental voice, this is some authority, some teacher, some nun, some priest, someone else that is in our mind, right? And that we've associated with sex, sexuality, with our body, with pleasure. That's the first step to realize, oh, okay, this isn't even this is not mine. This is that inner nun. I had a client that realized, grew up in a Catholic household, and had this part of her that she was really afraid to even look at. And once she was willing to just turn toward it, she realized, okay, yes, this is my conditioning from growing up in the type of household she grew up, and which
Mm.
was really because as she would pleasure herself, her daughter was in the other room, and she would have all of these thoughts of like, you're not supposed to do that, you don't deserve that, you're not, this is terrible, this is bad, this is wrong. And but realizing that's not coming from her, that's coming from her inner nun. And so it's like, okay, inner nun, I encourage people to name the different parts of themselves when they meet them, because then it's easier to engage. It's like, oh, there's my inner nun, whatever, Emma. Well, Emma loves to go pray for world peace in the local church. So send her off to go pray for world peace, or give her something that's really good for her to do and that's very fulfilling, so she doesn't need to repeat these things that are irrelevant as you're exploring your own sensuality and sexuality and pleasure quotient in your own body.
Mm.
I another uh, clients who'd been together for a long time. They had really rough sex. And that was like over the course of their 25-year relationship. It was really, rough, and that's how they liked it, and that's how, until she didn't like it that way anymore. And so she was terrified because she knew that her husband may take it personally, may get shut down, uh, and may feel judged because she wasn't into the kind of sex that they were having anymore. And so I encouraged her to have a conversation, just like I said, when she was in a really centered, heart
Mm.
centered place, not in the bedroom, not during the sex, right? So just like if you're planning and wanting to start a sure thing practice with your partner, you talk about it beforehand and then you plan it and then you put it in the calendar. Okay. So the same for this, was encouraging her to have this conversation and say, my body has changed. My desire has changed. Everything changes. We know that we're
Mm.
constantly changing. And when 25 years goes by, clearly a lot is different. And so to open the conversation by owning it, that it's nothing to do, you're doing nothing wrong, and this is how I liked it until recently. And so so that is going to cultivate intimacy in being willing to have the courage to say, things have changed. Things have changed. I love you. I want to explore something different. Let's explore together. Let's learn together. what could create pleasure in both of our bodies, because this isn't so pleasurable for me anymore. And I know you want me to feel pleasure.
Mm.
So I think that shame, like I said, is it also arises when our bodies change. If we're in a long-term relationship, clearly, like, my body does not look the same as it did when I met my spouse 25 years ago. And so a big part of the work that I do and what I offer in the book is about falling in unconditional acceptance of ourself, starting with unconditional acceptance and then getting into really loving ourselves wherever, however we are, whatever our body looks like, exactly as it is, exactly as we are. And so that's something that certainly comes up, certainly for a lot of women, but men too, as far as, are they still attractive? Do their partners still find them attractive, even though, their body looks really different after giving birth, going through, surgery or health problems or anything, and just time passing, decades passing, things change. So being willing to open our hearts and take risks and love ourselves and appreciate ourselves no matter what's happening, with our bodies, with the external. And so that then creates a model for our partner to really appreciate us as well, and being willing to ask, because some people really appreciate being appreciated, right? The different love languages. So if your love language is hearing words of affirmation, your partner should know that. So when you put on a new outfit and go prancing out, while he's sitting on the couch, hey baby, how do I look? you know, ask, ask for what you want. And that's a big part of the practice as well. A big part of the book is discerning what it is we want and then having the courage to ask for what we want. And as we ask for what we want, I talk about this. I've mentioned the different parts of ourselves. I've talked about my
Mm.
disconnected D and vivacious Viv, my wild sensual self. Well, there's, probably about 8 more in here. I call it our
What
the
did we
inner
in there?
pantheon,
Mm.
our inner pantheon, which like the Greek or Roman gods. So we have our own inner pantheon of these different parts of our personality, and within each inner pantheon is a wounded child, universally, right? You just can't get around it as a human being. And each of our wounded childs have a mantra or a core belief, which is also universally false. Okay, so mine is I don't matter. And it came about, growing up with my older brother who's 18
Yeah.
months older than me. And so they're all, I'm unlovable, I'm un, I'm wrong, I don't matter, all that flavor of
Mm.
wrongness. They're absolutely false. However, our inner kid doesn't know that. It thinks it's true, right? So as we are starting any practice that's a little edgy, like a sure thing practice, we need to make sure all parts of ourselves are along for the ride, especially our inner kids, especially our wounded kid. So when we are asking for what we want and we're taking a risk, we have to make sure our inner kid is well taken care of. I've got your back, little Ilana. You're right here. It's okay. If they say no, it doesn't mean that you don't matter. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean that at all. So then I take a risk. I make a request. And no matter if they say yes, no, or counter offer, I know that I'm worthy of receiving that. It may not be from this person. I may offer it to myself. I may need to ask somebody else, but it's being willing to take a risk and ask. And what I found is when my inner little kid is well taken care of, then I can ask for anything. And it doesn't matter if somebody says no, it's okay. It feels like a thrill to be able to ask for exactly what I want.
And it feels like the practice, the sure thing, the being able to ask what you want, it feels like it would spill over into broader life. And do you find that with clients that that they have a more positive working life, more positive family life, but it must have positive impacts on other parts of how we live.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. People have better relationships with their kids, better
Mm.
relationships with, in the workplace and just in general. And what I found and others have found is that there's a lot more overflow when I'm having a regular pleasure practice that's generating excess, then I have more to offer. And so when I got very involved in my local community and all different kinds of issues and creating a better Berkeley here. I live in Berkeley, California. And so there's more excess, which is where you mentioned at the top of the show, the Sure Thing Love Experiment,
Mm.
because that is about, can a weekly pleasure practice change the world? It changed my world. I'd like you to try it, Andrew, and see what happens with you and your spouse and if it changes your world. And how many practitioners would we need to start seeing changes in our communities, in our cities, in our in on the world in the world? Because what happens is we soften, we open, we're more fulfilled. We take that edge is gone, that edge of frustration or disconnection or disassociation. We're more embodied and in our hearts and in our pleasure. And as we're feeling it, then it flows out into, we have more to offer our everybody.
It's very true. I mean, if you look at a lot of people in the news, a lot of people in the media, a lot of people that have got a lot of things to say that aren't necessarily very positive. You can't believe in your heart of hearts that they have that they have a very comfortable, sure thing, live experiment, or that they have a very comfortable relationship. And I've always thought that. I thought, gosh, if we can have a more fulfilling relationship with our partners and with ourselves, then that has to have it has to put so much positive energy out into the world, just by the very nature of having the practice. So it feels like it's a very selfless as well as potentially selfish way to approach life, because you are putting out more positivity. You are giving back into society. You are giving out positive vibrations in a way that I just think we just don't do if we're very repressed and very hesitant and very uncertain about our relationship dynamic.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if we're hesitant and unsure, then we're putting out that anxiety, worry,
Mm.
hesitation, and honestly, it just doesn't it doesn't feel that good, right? It doesn't feel that good in our bodies, and so instead, we can swap that out for this experiment of, let's experiment with how good can we feel in our bodies? How close can we get? I cannot tell you, Andrew, the miracle is, I feel like tears welling up because there is so much tenderness, more so than ever. And my spouse and I have been together for 25 years, and it is just so precious and so heartful, the relationship that we have now. And it's 100% both of us agree that it's because of this weekly practice and just simply turning towards each other And even if it's not about being in the mood or um, or feeling sexy or having desire, it's simply turning towards each other and having time together, away from devices, cultivating something that the both of you enjoy. Because you're sure thing, I wanted and desire a sexual connection, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be massage. It could be you both love having walking in nature. And so you make it a magical walk where maybe you're holding hands, or maybe under a tree you kiss, or you do the hugging till relaxed. Whatever it is that turns you on, and finding that, and then inviting your partner into that. And the wonderful thing about the sure thing is that, number one, it's a sure thing. So you just commit every week. You're just going to turn towards each other. And every week it could be different. And maybe you go back and forth, and one person has an idea, and you're okay, I'm going to take us out on an adventure. And that's going to be our sure thing. Our sure things, like I said, are in our bedroom for the most part. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be whatever will be fulfilling for you to manifest your intention, your desire for embodied closeness with your partner. Yeah.
It's funny just hearing you say that and thinking about it, and I don't know, embracing it mentally, I guess. I feel different. I feel different. I just
Mm,
even talking about it with you, it
mm,
does feel like goosebumps, tingle, or whatever. Just think, gosh, yeah, wow. There's those 2 or 3 hours where it's just our thing. It's just our sure thing. It
yeah.
just feels like it feels like it's just upside all the way, really.
It is. I cannot, it is. And I want to just clarify for your listeners that 2 or 3 hours, fabulous. And you could have a sure thing in 10 minutes. So just know that
Yeah.
even that touching in, having that touchstone of a weekly turning towards each other. Sometimes you may have 2 or 3 hours, you may have all day and all night. Sometimes you may only have 10 minutes. Just make sure you have that rhythm of your weekly commitment.
Mm.
And some people are like, weekly, I want to do daily. Great. Daily. I have clients who hadn't had sex in a long time. And she just wanted to start with hugging, having a hug every day.
Mm.
And so that's what they did. And then she said to me, well, but I'm always the one by the end of the day saying we haven't had our hug. I said, just be patient. Just be patient. Sure enough, second week, he's like, hey, where's the hug? Third week, he's like, I'd like to add in a kiss every day. How does that sound to you? She's like, that sounds great. So now they have a hug and a kiss every day. So it's really whatever is right in your relationship, in your own body, and for you. That's what creating a sure, reliable thing for you to feel sensual fulfillment and intimate connection and embodied pleasure.
Because that's it, isn't it? It's not just the sex. It is the fact that that sort of intimacy, connection, just touch falls away from a relationship if you let it, and you become roommates, or you become just people that happen to share a house, really. And you, like, say, you don't kiss in the morning before you leave for work. You don't hug in the morning when you come back from work. You just, before you know it, you are just friends that sort of cohabiting, really. And it's just taking those steps back to where you want to be just feel like a really powerful thing to focus on. Do you just a random question? Do you think we are designed as humans to be monogamous?
No, I don't. I think it's a choice.
Hmm.
So, yeah. I think that I did have my spouse and I had an open relationship for the first couple of years uh, of our relationship, and that was wild and interesting. And it it, it I think it's a wonderful. There are so many different options that
Yeah.
people are exploring these days in monogamous relationship, in open relationship, in non-monogamy, in there's all sorts of things now. And I think as long as it's consensual, fabulous. Explore. And what I do know is from my own experience being in an open relationship and those I know who are in open relationships is it just takes you have to have the time and the
Mm.
capacity to do the emotional tending with your primary partner. And so
Yeah.
to make sure that that's solid and that continues to be solid and that then other partners and other activity and other play enhances that primary if that's what you're wanting is a primary. So you just
Mm.
have to make sure that you're both really up for that. You have the capacity and the time and the resource to have those conversations and do that emotional work together when things come up, because inevitably things are going to come up and there's going to be jealousy and stuff is going to arise.
Mm.
What I've found.
And I know the book's only just been birthed in a way, but do you know what the future holds? What are your plans for the coming years? How are you gonna carry on getting the message out there? Is there another book in
Ah,
you, or was it
ah,
too exhausting to even contemplate another book? What's next for you?
yeah. Well, thanks for that question, Andrew. Well, it's really I'd like to get this out as wide because so many people, every person I've talked to who's in a long-term relationship, it's like I need that book, and people say that this book should be on the nightstand of every couple in the world. So I'll hold that as the vision, and just getting it out there, word of mouth, being on podcasts like this. And I did get a really wonderful Kirkus review that they encourage. It's one of the foremost publishing reviewers, out there, and so it's going to be in their guide. I just found out this morning in April. So yeah, yeah. So they I got a get it review, and I, I I'd like to do an audio version of the book.
Hmm.
And there are I think 13 guided visualizations. Maybe there's 8. I can't remember exactly, but I'd like to have. I'd like to gift one of the guided visualizations that I've recorded to your listeners. So I will send you
Hmm.
that link, and
Okay.
it's the guided journey to deepen and connect with your inner sensual self, your wild sensual self, that part of you who really knows what they want and feels passion and desire. And so it's really a wonderful way to reconnect in with this part, even if you haven't connected with this part for a really long time. So I'll send you that link. I'd like to make an audio first of all of the guided visualizations so readers
Mhm.
can more easily really receive those journeys in the deepest way.
Hmm.
And I'm continuing to host here in Berkeley, and I will host, I haven't yet, online, the Sure Thing Love experiments, where we can come together and have an experience of cultivating pleasure in our bodies in a sensual way, clothes on. So it's not uh, in a way that really brings joy and aliveness, into our world, into our bodies, so then we can bring it into the world. So we'll see. I think I'll likely write another book, but it might not be on this topic, but we'll see. We'll just see. Right now, I'm really focused on getting the Sure Thing
Hmm.
a wider readership and
Mhm.
encourage, more however people want to use this book, because I'm not attached to people having a weekly practice. I encourage people to try it
Yeah.
because it's such a miracle for me. Try it. And I know that there's a lot in this book that will, really tenderize our hearts and have us come more into our hearts and in acceptance and love of ourselves. And then from there, everything's possible.
It is. My final question: would you say you're the happiest and most fulfilled you've been at this moment in time?
In this moment, yes. In this moment, yes. I do. I feel that. And it's it's a journey. It is a journey. And to be very honest, when I birthed my son, I was lucky enough to not have postpartum depression after the birth. I have many friends who had
Mm,
had that. Many women have that, and
yeah.
it's very difficult. I feel like I've had a little bit of that after the birth of this book. So it's like, okay, I can have more empathy for,
Mm,
and I don't even know if that's a thing when people birth a book, but that's what it's felt like to me. It's like, so it's been a time, Andrew, of thrill and excitement. And when people post reviews and when friends tell me that, wow, they're really getting so much out of the book, that's really heartening and so affirming.
yeah.
And there's a wondering of how best to certainly get this book out there, but what will serve. There's so much horror. I really
Yeah.
am just heartbroken as to what's happening, in the world right now. And so how can we, and what's happening in my local community as well. And so really bridging that and feeling like what is the best way? How is the best way to bridge creating a better a world that is really where all of us can thrive, where all of us have what we need, that is based on cooperation and community and not domination and power over. And so I'm still listening for, how to really bring the sure thing and the sure thing experiment more publicly
Yeah.
out. And so we'll see how I'm guided to do that. I welcome I welcome the inspiration. And whenever it arrives, I will be
They all
putting it
know.
out there. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much. You've been yeah, very generous with your thoughts, with your time, and just in sort of sharing your story. It's been yeah, it's been heartwarming in many ways.
Mhm. I've really enjoyed this time. Thank you for hosting me, Andrew.